So, uh, thank you very much for your kind introduction. And of course, thank you for your remarks. Would you like to sit in the audience? That may be more comfortable to see the. So that you can see what you. No, so you don't have to turn. So, it's really a pleasure for me to be here. And, when I was invited to give this talk, I immediately said yes, as DJ will say. And then I looked at the topic, accelerating modern research, innovations, and technologies, and I thought to myself that this is such a knowing the long tradition of CSIR in all this development of technologies and so forth, and all the support to industry and so many success stories since the inception of CSIR. What can I, as an academic, add? And I thought that I will share some of my experience because I have been doing research as an engineer. So though I try and do sort of fundamental research, but I always have an application in mind. And so I can share some of my experiences as that. And then when I was director of IIT Bombay, I had a chance to interact with many industries. I was head of the sort of our incubator also, so I got a close look at many of the startups over 10 years. And of course, I've had a very long, I mean, from the beginning, since 1987, I have been interacting closely with many labs, initially with NCL, and then I've served as on the RC of CSMCRI. I was chair of the RC of IIP, and of course, I've been to IICT many, many times. I've been to NIIST. I've visited most of the labs, so not most, but a large number of those related to chemistry, chemical engineering. And of course, I have a great admiration for this. So the line that I said was heartfelt, and please go ahead and use it. I have no copyright. So this is what I thought that I'll talk about. Something very general. I wanted to just introduce some ideas of what are the connections between art, science, and technology. And this is sort of a review, or at least just a brief mention of a new book that has come out. And then I'll talk in terms of examples that are in my knowledge about pathways to this commercialization. Then a little bit about CSIR, what my opinions are, and how we can look forward, what can we see, what are some of the new research areas that I feel are quite important, and then finally conclusions. So this is the book I was talking about. It's called Augmented Thinking for a Complex World. It's called The Nexus, the Convergence of Art, Technology, and Science. It's by Otino and Mao. This is Professor Otino. Actually, Rama, he is my PhD guide. Professor Joshi is like a mentor to me for many years, but I didn't do my PhD with him. So, this book is quite interesting. Professor Otino is a chemical engineer, very famous chemical engineer, and also he's as a hobby, he is an artist, so he paints and so forth. And so he was sort of trying to see what are these connections. And the basic theme of this book is that the world has become extremely complex now. And if you sort of look at the world, we have to find some creative solutions. And to find these, we need to augment the way that we think. But to understand that, we must understand, how essentially how society is divided, because we actually think in different ways. So all of us in this room, we think in a particular way. But if you go and go to, let's say, JJ School of Art or something, their mindset is going to be entirely different. So what is this connection between art, science, and technology? And so he explores that. And really, he's sort of talking about what is the difference between complex and complicated. And the basic idea is that uh, things like jetliners or skyscrapers or nuclear submarines, they're complicated. They have many parts, they're highly designed, but each part works as it is designed. Whereas something like an ecological system, there's so many parts interacting with each other. So that's a complex system because nobody has really designed it. It's evolving, it's self-organizing and doing these things. And similarly with cities, the way cities grow or how our brain works, these are all complex systems because they're not designed as such. Our neurons grow, they may die, whatever, and the functioning changes accordingly. So how do we deal with complex systems like this? We know this very well. We do this on a daily basis. But how do we deal with these kinds of systems? So this is in the book. And just a very, very small part of this. I'm not going to spend too much time on this. I encourage you to, those who are interested, to just get hold of that book. But I'll just give you these ideas, that core ideas that are there in this book. That what happens? Oops. This is not reverse progress, it is progress. No, no. I think in this sending from here to there, it got, I don't know what else we'll discover. But, if you see what is the key word for art, that key word is create. So, you just create something new. Actually, there's no method as such. You can't say that this is art and this is not art. It is only the artists who decide what is art. At one time, everyone was painting beautifully and photorealistic type of paintings. But today, no artist does that. So, there's each time there is some completely new movement which starts, that, you'll have someone like Monet doing impressionist painting, then suddenly Picasso comes and they're doing cubist and so forth. So each art movement sort of starts completely separate, and he calls this as break with. That means you break with what was there in the past and do something entirely new. On the other hand, if you see science, the key word there is discover. So, you look at nature and try and discover how some new phenomena through experimentation. And then you use the scientific method. That is very well defined. You come with a hypothesis, do an experiment, and if the experiment contradicts the hypothesis, then you have to throw out that hypothesis. So this, and then it builds on existing knowledge. So if you have to show a graph of progress versus time, then you'll see a continuous increase, and then there'll be a jump, again slow increase, jump, and so forth. And then if you look at engineering and technology, the key word there is invent. So there's all this knowledge, you can put it together and invent something. You can invent this, you can invent microphone, so forth. Those things are not natural. And this is really the thing, that you end up designing and building complex systems and products. And really, this is a combination of science, art, and economics. Because, there's no technology without economics. You can't spend whatever you want. If a car costs you 100 crores or something, and nobody's going to buy it. So this is really what is technology. And what technology is characterized by is this invention, obsolescence cycles. That some new invention happens, but something else will come and take its place. And we've seen in our own lifetime that we used to play records. Older people like me, we used to play records. Then the cassette player came. Then there's the very popular Walkman, and then there was a CD player. Then there was, Apple came out with this iPod, or there were those small players. And Today, none of these things exist because everything is on the smartphone. And so each time something got wiped out. So if you look at the progress versus time, there's an increase, things rapidly increase, then they saturate, and then suddenly something new comes. So this disappears, and then a new thing starts, and so forth. So this just gives a very broad picture of this. And then you think about innovation, which is quite related to technology and so forth, which is there is an invention that is part of innovation. Sometimes innovation is as a result of continuous improvement. You keep going little better, and then you get a breakthrough. This is very much important, that you have to meet some need, because innovation is not just about an invention. It's not just that you made a microphone, but it's something useful that somebody needs. And then to meet that need, you use technology as an enabler. So it works the other way, that you find that, okay, so that I can speak loud enough to reach all of you, I need some device. Okay, so I invent a microphone to meet that need. And then, of course, there must be an economic benefit in all this, otherwise it's not going to go forward. So these are just some basic things that are there. So, and they're very useful to think of when you're doing process development and so forth. So if you look at innovation, a key part of innovation is design. And when you look at design, you have a function for that, which could depend on engineering and technology. But there's also a form. What does it look like? Which involves aesthetics and art. So you then have one more term over there, which is a combination of art and technology. So in this way, these three things are related: art, technology, and science. And you can apply them to processes, products, services, and I'll discuss some examples. So from my field, this is a very typical sort of photograph of a plant, a chemical plant, what it looks like. And you'll have a flow sheet, subsystem design, integration, optimization. You have to also be, besides the whole thing working, you have to be concerned about safety, stability, flexibility, supposing the raw materials change a little bit, and so forth. And there are a huge number of components in there. And so there's a lot of, things that you have to design, but there's also a high technology component. So usually at the heart of this chemical process will be some technology which is protected by IP. So somebody else doesn't go and make exactly the same thing. So this is what really gives the commercial advantage. And, because this system is so large, and you are at such a large scale, you have a huge number of design choices. That why is the pipe going like this? Why can't it go the other way? Why do I use 2 heat exchangers? Why can't I use 3 heat? So beyond a point, the designer has to have some, judgment that, okay, this looks right. And that is what I would call art. So there's some art of design even in these kinds of systems. And, many other such systems are there that, you look at a airliner or a computer chip. So there is high technology, but you also have to make many design choices, and that you can classify as art. So those who are really expert designers, they have that feeling for what is good, what is a good design, and that would be classified as art. Look at something like this. So, you have BlackBerry. Some of the older people will remember using this. And this was the favorite phone of President Obama. And then this is, of course, the iPhone. And again, this has got, if you look at this, because it's a consumer product, this unlike the others, this is a very high art component. It has to look, both of these, they look very appealing. But there's a lot of technology also, like the touch screen, which was very new in this, the kind of software with all these icons and so forth, and how easy it was to use. So there is art because it looks nice. We want to, possess something that looks so attractive, but also there's a lot of technology in there. So these products are all combinations of all these things. So, that just gives some background of what are some of the basics that are involved. And let me now just give some examples of technology and commercialization. So if I just continue from the example of the iPhone, so really, if you look, this phone was introduced in January 2007. At that time, Nokia, I mean, it was just absolutely the leader. It probably had 90% market share. Even in India, everybody had a Nokia phone only. Nobody used anything else but Nokia. But this was not a this was not a smartphone, just for calls and so forth, messages and calls. And then those who were, who could afford it, because this was extremely expensive, and who wanted to do email and so forth on their phone. In those days, it was almost impossible. The only way you could do it was through BlackBerry, because they had such a good email client, and then they had a keyboard to type and so forth. And they were absolutely dominant. When this phone was released, there was a lot of excitement because of its really iconic design and all these high technology involved in it. But actually, iPhone sales in the first year were quite disappointing, and the other two companies, they continued to dominate. So it didn't really make an impact when it was introduced. But in the following year, this is sort of, they introduced a product, didn't work. What do we do? So they introduced this app store. Now you have Play Store and App Store. It's become like a normal thing, but it was not there before 2008. So in 2008, they introduced the App Store, and suddenly the sales skyrocketed because for the first time, the phone was opened up. You could download any app you wanted, and you could get functionality on the phone. For example, you could download an Uber app. You could then call a cab and so forth. So suddenly it became much more useful than just the basic apps that came with the phone. Today, there are about 1.8 million apps on this app store. And of course, those who develop these apps, they get paid, and they earned about $155 billion from this. So, this sort of shows that, okay, you can come up with a great product, great art, great science, great design, but it has to meet the customer need. Nobody was willing to give up their BlackBerry just for this. But when you got that added flexibility, that added sort of service through this, suddenly it became a great success. So it got a competitive edge, and really they have had since then continuous innovation to keep market share. Today it's surprising that in spite of this phone being so expensive, it's the 15th now, iPhone 15, if keeping track. It is the largest selling smartphone in the world today, which is really surprising in spite of all the competition from Samsung and so forth. So this just illustrates, what it takes for technology development and to be successful in the market. To create a working device is one thing, but to succeed in the market, you have to go one step further, and that is this interaction with the market. This is another point I wanted to make. It's about Raman scanners. Madam was just mentioning it in our tea. Now, C.V. Raman in 1938 came up with the science behind that, the Raman effect. But, Raman spectroscopes were commercialized only 2 decades ago. So it was a long gestation period because, to go from science to a working device required so much more. And, today you can have these handheld scanners. And so the second point I wanted to make was that this path from science to technology can be quite long. And I'll give you some more other examples of this. Here, I wanted to basically say that science, basic science is very important for technology. So, you will remember this project, at least many other scientists will remember, that there was this sort of huge project called the Human Genome Project, which was to completely map human DNA. And this was started in 1987. And at that time, the very proposal sounded impossible, that it just can't be done. It will take too long to map 3 billion base pairs which are there in the human genome. That was just considered that this is really a big stretch. But it was actually completed much earlier, I think 2 years earlier than the projected completion date, and it cost about $3 billion. Now, what was this? This was just saying that, okay, I'm taking the human DNA and I just want to know what is the sequence of base pairs on the whole DNA. There was nothing more than that. It was just saying, okay, we want to read the DNA, that's all. But there were huge number of spin-offs. So you can say this was just a pure science project. This was a challenge. Let's see what is there in the DNA. But huge number of spin-offs. So first of all, the technology for DNA sequencing has continued to improve since then. And we know about Moore's law, that every few years the computing power doubles. But the same thing is happening in sequencing, that the sequencing cost is falling and the sequencing time is falling at an exponential rate. Once we did this, suddenly this idea of personalized medicine came, because each of us is slightly different. So maybe the kind of, it hasn't yet become practical, but slowly we are going in that direction. There's a possibility of drug discovery, because you could actually, from this mapping, come up with perhaps some drugs that would be specific for certain types of uh, genes. You could identify genetic disease much easier. So you can just map out. So even before you have a child, if, two parents can figure out if there's a chance of some recessive gene uh, coming forward and creating problems. This gave a chance for people to study evolution, because then statistical methods were able to say that, okay, this is the fish DNA and this is the, snake DNA, then when did they, separate out? What was the time? So this basic theory of evolution was then, and there are now many interesting studies which, by looking at human populations as they are today, you can say where did we come from, and everyone should now know that we are all African. It's guaranteed. So we all came from Africa. That's our origin. And we all had one mother. From the same mother, and we are all descended. And that is, again, through this sequencing. Forensics got a big lift. So even tiny amounts of DNA could be used to identify people. And even now, you can see that 20-year-old cases, murder cases, and so forth, are being solved because they had preserved the evidence. They could extract the DNA, and once they got that DNA, there are many of these genealogy sites. It's not so popular in India, but in the US, there are many companies. You can just send them a small sample of your DNA, which is just a scraping of your cheek or something. And then they will give you your DNA profile and tell you who are your ancestors and so forth. So this costs you maybe $100 or something like this. So millions of people have got their gene in their databases. And what these people are doing is once they get DNA, they talk to them. And even if the murderer's DNA is not in the database, they can find out if his relatives are, who his relatives are. And from that they can track. So it's, really made a huge difference. And then it has also led to many DNA synthesis techniques like PCR for amplification, CRISPR, and this has given rise to a huge field of synthetic biology. So, this is one thing that pure science can then, once this technique is established, then the kind of technologies that come out can be huge. But then it's not always about big science. Process is also very important. And so here I wanted to give an example about just process and product innovation, incremental improvement. So today, we all have a high opinion about Japanese cars. But after the Second World War, they were making only small cars for the Japanese market, which were sort of copies of the US cars that were there. And they had a pretty poor reputation. I mean, nobody thought much of Japanese cars. But from the 60s to 80s, there was a lot of process innovation. And, we all hear about now those words like Kaizen and just-in-time manufacturing and all this. So all those innovations in just the production techniques and quality assurance, they all were done there. These ideas of lean manufacturing so that you cut the cost of manufacturing and so forth. And as a result of all this, there was no new technology, same old technology, but the cars became much more reliable and the quality was much better. And as a result of this, they built up a good reputation and they could then export to the most competitive markets. So this is another way of thinking of technology development, that it's not that you got some new, invented something new, no. But then once they had done that and they'd established themselves, then there was a phase of innovation. And they've done so many innovations. But one real great success was this electric hybrid that Toyota company, it has not come to India, Prius, which has, it was just a great success and it got gained a mass market. And then, of course, then they could introduce luxury models and manufacturing and so forth. And today, these companies are in a dominant position. So through process improvement, they gained market share. Through innovation, they became very competitive. So this is another way of looking at things. And then let me give you a couple of examples related to a very important area of climate change. So to mitigate the climate change, there is a couple of things that people are thinking of. One is, in India, we have this great mission also, solar mission. So instead of fossil fuel, we can use solar photovoltaics for generating electricity. But if you actually see again, to repeat the point, the photoelectric effect was discovered by Hertz in 1887. It was theoretically explained by Einstein in 1905. And I'll show you how the costs have changed. Similarly, we can reduce fossil fuel in mobility by using electric vehicles using lithium-ion batteries. Now, these were first demonstrated in 1974 by Whittingham in UK. The modern variant was done by Goodenough and some others in 1980. And then the first commercial battery was made by Yoshino in 87. And the Nobel Prize for Chemistry in 2019 was awarded to these three for their advances. Now, how have these technologies evolved? So let me just show one by one. You don't have to read everything on this graph, but just look at how things are going. And this is really the key thing. And you see, this looks a lot like the graph I showed you for advancement of science. That you can see that there's sort of continuous improvement, sudden jumps, then slow improvement, sudden jump. And this is just showing for different technologies how the cell efficiency has improved over time. And you can see that if you look at all this through lots of innovations, literally hundreds and hundreds of innovations, the cell efficiency has gone from 20% to 48%. That means nearly half of the light falling on the solar cell can be converted to electricity. That is a huge thing. And so this just illustrates this slow improvement in or slow advancement of science. But that has a direct impact on cost. So as efficiency increases, as manufacturing methods improve, you have the fall in cost. So over here is number of dollars per watt, and this is years. So in 1975, the cost was about $110 per watt. That was the cost of solar PV. If anyone was making it on those days, you could have just said, okay, forget it. This is not feasible. Nobody's ever going to use this. But, with continuous improvement in the technology, the costs have fallen. And now, compared to that, the cost is zero. It's extremely small. And, you can see how, initially there's a very rapid change, and there's a slow change, and there's again another advancement and slow change. And these vertical lines essentially show the doubling of capacity. What is the time it has taken for the capacity to double? So main point is that the cost has fallen. So you have growth, change in technology. And the same way, you can see the usage in terms of installed capacity has also, as costs fall, then it becomes more and more feasible to use it. And already solar PV is about 3% of global energy generation, and it will keep growing. And you can see, it's it's not plateauing, it's still in the growth phase. Now let's see about lithium-ion batteries. Madam is here, the battery expert here. So, uh, uh, this is just showing the energy density. That's one of the parameters. I mean, not the only one. One of the parameters, like how much volume does the battery occupy in your car? So this is watt hours per liter. And just to see, just to illustrate how things have improved, from 55, it's gone to 450 in these just 12 years. That's a huge advancement. And it's still, I mean, you can see that it's still on the upward path. Maybe in a few years, it will be even more. And of course, we have some way to go because gasoline has a energy density of 9,700. But already with this energy density, it's fine. There are lots of electric cars in the market and so forth. And the costs have also come down. So in 3 decades, lithium-ion battery costs have fallen by 98%. And it says over here in 2021 that in a few years, electric vehicles may cost the same as their combustion engine counterparts. Well, if you take the subsidies into account, that has already happened. Today, the cost, in fact, if you buy in the US, if you buy an electric car, it's cheaper than a combustion engine car because of the subsidy. And of course, once the costs fall, then the number also increases. And now there are already more than 10 million vehicles in the global stock, but only about 1% of the global stock is left. So we have a long way to go. But again, the main thing is to say that, okay, this is the way it's increasing. It's not plateauing. It's still going to go up. And so this is again the growth of technology. So in India, of course, we don't see as many cars, but the number of two-wheelers is huge. So it says two-wheelers sales increased by 132%. So this means that this is a successful technology. And almost 2 lakh units were sold in 2021. So I just wanted to try and connect the science, technology, because the technology involved in manufacturing, cost, and then how it's being used. So these things are all related to each other. I wanted to give one example from my own very old research, that maybe I should have given this earlier, but here again, I wanted to basically say that there's some disconnect between science that you do and when the technology becomes implemented. So, my thesis involved mathematics of fluid mixing. And in the 70s, Lorenz had shown that if you take some equations, differential equations, uh, and then you do a numerical computation of those equations, then the solution is chaotic. That means that, it doesn't have a nice, smooth result. It can go anywhere. It's sort of random solution. And so we said that can we apply this idea to mixing? Because, if these are the velocities in, let's say, 3 different directions of a fluid particle, then these equations will essentially say what is the path of the fluid particle as it goes in the mixer. So can we find some velocities in which the motion is chaotic? And it turns out that looking at a lamina, so this is like as if I'm trying to mix a very viscous liquid like grease or honey or something like that, where you can't generate turbulence. So it turns out that if you have a 2-dimensional flow, but which is time invariant, then you can only get regular motion. There's no chaos possible. If it's 2-dimensional and time periodic, then it can be regular or chaotic, and of course the others are chaotic. And so you can get seemingly random motion, and of course, as a result of that, good mixing in laminar flows. So, those who want to play around, and if you have a calculator, you can do this. This is the simplest example of a chaotic system. So supposing you have any number, I'm calling it xn minus 1, and then you calculate xn minus 1 into 1 minus xn minus 1. Okay, it's a very simple function. Depending on the value of this parameter a, you can get very different behavior. So I'm just plotting this xn, that is how it evolves, starting with x0 equal to 0.5. That is the first position is 0.5. So I start at 0.5. If a is 1.2, it just goes like this and like a steady state. If a is 3, then it goes like a periodic thing. So it just jumps between two values. So it's like xn is something and you put it back in there, you get back. So if you do it twice, you get back to the original thing. But if you go to higher values of a, 3.99, then the result is just completely chaotic. That is, you can see that there's just no correlation where it's going to end, what the value of xn is going to be. So this is this idea of chaos, that a very simple function can give you essentially a random result. The result comes out random. And so we use this similar thing where we had a flow in which there was this vortex going around here. Then we stop it. So this goes on for some time. So we stop this and then the fluid rotates over about this point for some time. And so if you actually look at what is the trajectory of a particle, when it's over here, it'll just make a circle and stop after t by 2. Then this one comes on, then it'll make another circle depending on its radius from here. Then it'll make another arc of the circle, another arc, and so forth. So instead of drawing the full trajectory, if we just plot the points after every time step t, then you get a series of dots, and that's called a Poincare section, after the great mathematician Poincare. And this is a compressed way of just seeing what this trajectory is, just getting into the science of this whole thing. And then, if you now do it for a long time, it turns out that if this time period is very small, then you get very regular motion. But if your time period is high, then the dots go everywhere and you get chaos. So using this similar kind of idea, I devised one design which is called a partitioned pipe mixer, in which you have two plates like this, and this thing is rotating. So this is one unit, and you can have many such units one after the other. So you'll have a long pipe with many units, and the fluid goes through this. And what happens is that in the cross section, it goes round, but when it comes here, it gets cut and then it goes in the other thing. So it's something similar to the flow I told you about, that, there's a change in the streamlines every time you go from one unit to the next. Now in this, if you look at what happens in the cross section, then depending on the speed of rotation, at low speeds, you have completely regular motion. And then at very high speeds, you have essentially chaotic motion, but you still have some regular patches in there. You can explain all this through theory. But what are these patches? Remember, this is just a cross section. So if you look at the 3D view, these are actually tubes going through the mixer. So if you imagine this type of mixer, then what it says is that if you are outside the tube, then you'll be extremely well mixed. And if you're in the tube, then you'll go essentially unmixed because the motion is regular. And then one of the students who came after me in the PhD, he actually did experiments like this. And so you can see this yellow line is inside the tube, so it essentially goes undeformed. The orange line is in this region, so it just gets completely mixed up. So this shows, the power of chaotic mixing and all. So this was published in '87, but then over the years, a large number of devices have been made based on this concept, and there are many, many patents. And I just gave an example of one of them, which I found: continuous chaotic mixer, convection heat exchanger, and convection reactor, Japanese patent, 2001. You can go and look, you'll find large number of these. So it's like there is a concept, and then you can do many variations on it and get many new devices. So, I've talked about lots of examples of technology commercialization, but most of those are for the bigger companies. Startups are a very unique kind of species. And what we have seen is that they're really excellent for technology transfer. And this is something I hope that CSIR will take up in a big way. And we were discussing just before the lecture, what are the issues for technology transfer? That ownership isn't there, that you do the technology transfer, give it to industry saying it's your technology, you come and fix it every time something goes wrong. Whereas in a startup, what happens is that the owner of the technology starts the business, and then they have full ownership and they keep modifying it. So, yesterday there was this, Madam mentioned, we were celebrating 10 years of our School of Entrepreneurship, and two of our very successful entrepreneurs for these two companies, these are all big companies now. They were, I think, Idea Forge has already done an IPO and so forth. So both of these guys were there. So, I knew them personally because, they were in the incubator. I used to, we used to review their progress on a quarterly basis and so forth. So Idea Forge, they're brilliant mechanical engineers and really very interested in making things. So Ankit Mehta yesterday was saying that while he was at IIT, he made some 20 devices that worked, so he was really good at fabricating and designing and making things. So they wanted to start a business of their own. And so their first product was that time mobile phones had started and power cuts and all this. So they said, we'll have a hand-operated mobile charger. So, you press something and then it generates a little charge and it'll charge the phone. Okay, this is a failure. But the company didn't close. And instead they pivoted to drones, which were just starting off. We just started hearing about drones. This was, maybe 7, 8 years, more than that ago. These were undergraduates. It was a very strong technical team. So there were 4 or 5 of them, very strong in technical part. And their strengths were in fabrication and design. And they were able to make drones And they've interacted a lot with our defense forces, and they were able to make drones exactly the ones that they want. And today they are a pioneering drone maker, and they're very, very successful in terms of their sales and so forth. The second company is called Atomberg. Their first product was actually a data acquisition system. So they were electrical engineers, they made this device. And so if you're in the lab, you want to do some data logging, then you connect this and then your data will go on the computer. Again, did not sell at all. They sold a few devices to professors within the institute, but beyond that, they couldn't do anything. And I was really surprised and quite worried when they decided to pivot to energy efficient fans. So if you go on Amazon, then you can look for Gorilla fans. These are the guys who make that. And I thought, okay, this is going to be a disaster. Fans, we know Orient fans and so many big companies. How can these few young people compete? But they were extremely strong as a technical team. And they were both electrical, mechanical, and design. And what their USP was that they said our fans are the most energy efficient fans that are there in the market. And they were able to get a significant market share in this competitive market. And they're doing extremely well now. So these are two companies which were run by undergraduates. I'll tell you about two companies that are started by faculty members. So in both of these, the key thing was design. Good engineering and design, execution. But here, one of our faculty members, they, through their research, came up with an engine control system. So, you can control the flow of fuel to the engine in such a way that it will give you the required power, but it will minimize the fuel consumption. So it's a really nice product. Faculty was the lead, along with his MTech and PhD students. They formed the company. This is a research-based product. That is, came through his research and protected by IP. And these engine control systems are there in all the big cars and so forth. And so he was competing with international players like German company Bosch and so forth. But they were good enough and they really have grown. I think it's valued quite highly now, maybe a unicorn already. And they are starting to sell in Europe. So they're able to develop a research-based technology good enough to sell in Europe. And then the second one is this very new company called ImmunoAct. I don't know if you read in the papers. A young faculty member from our institute, he has come up with this cancer immunotherapy. This therapy is amazing because what it does is they take out your T cells from the blood, they modify them in such a way that they will go and attack the cancer cells and they inject it back. So it's your own body which is acting against the cancer, but the immune system has been sort of slightly trained to go and kill the cancer cells. So this is called CAR T cell technology. And so they developed this. It's of course completely research, very high tech research-based project, protected by IP. It's not invented here. This CAR T cell technologies exists everywhere, but they have their own version of it. The clinical trials were conducted with Tata Memorial Hospital and it was successful. And now they have got clearance and they are going to actually start treating patients. So, there's two different types. This is the design-based, this is the research-based. So even when we are planning technology development within CSIR, we have to sort of categorize and both can succeed. So this is all I have to say about technology and commercialization. So I may be going a little long. You tell me whenever you want me to stop. So if you're looking at technology development, science is at the core of it. That's really the key thing. But you have to realize that linkage between science and technology may not be direct. The advancements in science, often gradual, they make the technology more and more commercially viable. We also have to realize that products are typically a combination of many technologies, and design plays a very important role. And once you say design, then the art also comes in there. So aesthetics. Startups are an excellent vehicle for technology commercialization. The technical team can make, this is what I was trying to say, that when you go into the market, you have to change. You start with some product, you go there, nobody wants to buy it, you have to be able to do something else. Similarly, if you have a certain technology, you have to be able to make changes to the product as required. And so you need a good technical team. The products get refined through constant innovation and reaction to customer demands. So technical expertise is essential. And really, ownership of the technology is essential. So this is what we are facing in many cases. That's why I put it in, what we were talking about. That when you when you do technology transfer to an industry lacking in expertise to absorb and improve the product, it may result in failure of the technology. So you give the thing, everything is working in the lab, it's perfect, it goes over there, but the people there are just not strong enough technically to make it work. Sometimes that little touch is required to make it work. So then they say this doesn't work. So they'll just come and say that, oh, this technology doesn't work. But even if they get it to work, let's say the scientists go there, set up the plant, it is working. But what happens then is that development is frozen because they are not going to build the next one. And I saw this in one of the public sector companies. I remember as a young faculty member, I had gone, I was an assistant professor at that time, and it was a polymer company. And so, they had a 1960s plant which they had imported from somewhere, then a 1980s plant, a 1990 plant. Each was operating perfectly because the engineers were terrific. They could make the plant run. And, but, they couldn't take that technology and make it better or improve it. They were running it like that in a frozen state. So this, if in those days there was no competition in the market, so it didn't matter. I don't know, before the 90s, if you made any polymer, there would be a line of customers outside your factory to buy it. So it didn't matter. But if you're in a competitive market, this can be deadly. But should we do this? I know that this happens in academia, it happens in CSIR, that you are always trying to transfer technology to a company which is not really in a position to understand what's going on, to make it better, and so forth. But we should do it because we should see it as capacity building. That now they are the hands on this process. If there's some bright people in there, they will figure it out and hopefully, go to the next stage. So I think this is what I would say. Then I wanted to just say a few things about CSIR in praise of CSIR. See, it started, actually, the idea was quite early because they wanted this formation of DSIR as it existed in UK and other places. But the Viceroy said it does not required. You don't need, India doesn't require CSIR. So in 40, Arcot Ramaswamy Mudaliar, he was actually a member of the Viceroy's Council for Commerce. He said you have to do it. And he started BSIR with a budget of 5 lakhs a year with SS Bhatnagar as the director. And can you imagine 80 researchers started work in so this was called the board and they were doing applied work. And then in 41, Industrial Research Utilization Committee for translating results into application. Same language we are saying today also. So it has been going on. And they got an industrial research fund of 10 lakhs a year. I mean, in those days, that was a lot of money, 1941. And then in 42, CSIR was set up, 43, governing board started 5 laboratories. The annual budget was 10 lakhs. and a grant of 1 crore for setting up the laboratories. Then in 47, the Prime Minister then said that I wish to associate myself with the council since I'm interested in its work, and also in order to show the importance, or show what importance the new government attaches to scientific development in India. So, when it was set up, the government clearly realized how important such an institution is. And so the Prime Minister became president of the council. I used to always wonder why did he bother? But then when I read, I saw that he actually had his education in science. Though he became a lawyer later, but he did the science tripos in Cambridge. And so he knew, I mean, when he used to go to Cambridge, he knew all his teachers were overall famous scientists there and so forth. And even in the 5-year plan, so the role of science in modern life is now generally recognized. The most significant development in this sphere has been the establishment of national laboratories in different parts of the country. Expected that their research would help the medium and small scale industries in enabling them to reduce costs and improve products. Oh, this is not written today. This is 1951. Okay. So, the mission has remained consistent, and I think that's something that is to be proud of. And then by 53, 11 labs were set up. But what actually happened is that once these labs were set up, and because of the importance given by the government to the labs, the top scientists and researchers of the country, they flocked to CSIR. So, they left all the university jobs and everyone was in CSIR. So there was a really premier applied research labs. They had, the absolutely best manpower. And they contributed immediately to address many technological needs of the nation. So in 1951, we conducted the first election, and the ink they were able to do. And they forged links with a number of industries and provided technical support and training over the years. And of course, there's gone into academics also to train PhD, MTech, and BTech. Secretary BTechs are really very famous in our country. So really a lot of contributions, but the start that was given was very strong. Now, there's a lot of talk about ECF and all this. Whenever I go to any CSIR meeting, ECF is always on top of everyone's mind. And, though the direct earnings of CSIR labs from technology transfer and consultancy have always been smaller than the budget. So it's never been able to do that. But what I'll say is that the indirect contributions have been invaluable. Because we have to realize that CSIR is not a business. You transfer technology at almost zero cost. If you really charge the cost of the technology when you transfer it, you would be extremely wealthy. But, the market isn't there for that. The low cost but world-class support provided by CSIR labs have built capacity of numerous industries across all sectors. So, this is that support, the capacity building that I was talking about, that is extremely important. And this has enabled many industries to stand on their own feet and grow. So through this type of technology intervention, CSIR has been contributing to self-reliance in the industrial sector from its origin. And Atmanirbhar Bharat has been its motto from the start. And this is, of course, personal views. So I'm writing it right on top. I'm not taking it from somewhere. Now, India has become a leading manufacturer in many sectors. And I can say for sure that we would never be a pharma giant if it wasn't for all the chemical labs of CSR, CDRI, NCL, and IICT and so forth, which it just wouldn't have happened. So CSR has provided and continues to provide a technical foundation for the growth of the industry. So, there is someone to go to when companies face issues. They can go to an organization which has that expertise. And of course, this is going to continue. It's an important national asset, and it will continue to play a very important role in the industrial growth. So again, my personal opinion. And when I see CSIR today, because I have a good view of being in the society, in the GB, I hear a lot of presentations and all. So it's really doing extremely well, and I compliment the DG for all the new initiatives that are being taken. I think that it's going in absolutely the right direction. So these things, this is what is in my mind when I'm saying what to do next. So what should we do? Now CSIR is already here, and madam said that, okay, it's not just now impact in India, we want to make impact internationally. So what is the key thing? And I think you have to ensure excellence in research. I mean, this is really the absolute most important, that we have to, the standards of research have always been high, but the bar keeps going up. So CSI has to continuously work hard to improve on this. And this is really key. And both types of research, fundamental and applied, have to be done. And applied could be to solve a specific problem, fundamental to understand a broad field. This is the way I'm thinking about it. But the quality should be high. That is really the key thing. And the first element in this is recruitment of outstanding scientists. So, when you started, every top scientist of the country came and joined you. And you have to make sure that that tradition continues. So you have to do outstanding scientists. And over here, I feel that, there is some level of centralization that is going on. And that's why I'm putting a question mark there. I've, as when I was director of IIT Bombay, that time, I completely decentralized. I said that every department has to decide on its own who they will recruit. And why is that? Because they are the ones who have the biggest stake in it, and they are the best in terms of technical knowledge. They are the ones who will know best. They'll be able to do the judgment best. And so, you have to see this, a lab or a department, as a organic entity, and how it grows. That self-governance and growth, you will be able to attract. There used to be so many great schemes like this quick hire, this, that, where a brilliant guy comes, you just grab him. I think we have to sort of discuss those things, and I feel this is really something where a lot of effort can be put in. The other thing is that we need a lot more investment in CSIR, because this should be the repository of all the cutting edge facilities. And because we want that kind of research to be done. So the facilities must be updated. And then within the institution, of course, there's already a fantastic culture, but that culture should continue to encourage quality research. And we also discussed this that you mentioned that it's not always the scientists who can take it all the way to the product. So this system of translation, I think I'm not the best person to talk about it. Maybe you are the who can come up with this system. Maybe NRDC will have a strong system to take this science to actual application. And here, I feel that having a strong startup component, even encouraging our own scientists, saying, okay, you take this and go. We'll take you back if you fail. I mean, those kinds of things, if you do, then this will have, because that ownership is required. So you have to come up with some way that the ownership of the technology goes when the technology goes to the industry. And then another thing I've been feeling for some time is that now, CSIR has grown, it has matured to this extent. You have to move from slowly PhD students to postdocs as the primary research manpower. There are enough postdocs in the country, and I mean, potential postdocs in the country. And the reason I say this is that the training component comes down once you go from PhD to postdoc. And so then that fits in more with your mission, where you're trying to achieve certain scientific goals, that you have more of postdocs who will uh, be ready to immediately start work, whereas for PhD students, there's many more other obligations. And I feel so these are some of the things that I would suggest. And I talked about quality research. It's sometimes very easy to say, okay, let's just look at, when you're judging everybody in the lab, let's look at number of papers. Okay, not number of papers. Okay, let's look at citations. So I came across this thing. I don't know if you all have ever heard of this. Goodhart was an economist, and this is what they call Goodhart's law. It says when a measure becomes a target, it ceases to be a good measure. So, I don't know if that much is clear. That is, if I say that you have to have at least, if I say I'm going to judge you by number of papers that you write, that's it, it's gone. Then I will write maximum number of papers. I don't care what quality. He said, okay, forget it. I'll just look at impact factor of journal. Again, then I will just look at the journal and say, kaisa paper, what sort of papers are published in this journal. I'll write only that so that I can publish in those journals. Again, gone. Your purpose is then served because you want quality research, number of citations. Okay, I'm going to start writing review papers now. So, it's just, once you say it's a target, then so this is something that for the leadership in the labs, they have to sort of think about it and say that, okay, what is it that we want? How can we encourage that? Doesn't matter if you're not published, but you've done this great work that is going to make an impact and so forth. Fine. So, in our place, we had faculty members never written a single paper in 5 years, but they've written a 800-page book, which is like, then all the international reviews are saying that this is absolutely seminal work in mathematics or whatever. Fine, you don't have to write papers. You're too busy writing the book. So I mean, you have to see what is the way to look at it, because your tasks are sort of very multifarious. Interaction with industry, developing technology, consultancy, all sorts of things, training. And so, how do you define quality research? That I think is something that you have to come up with. So by this, a corollary of this is that good research generally has higher metrics. But higher metrics, this cross it should have been here. High metrics doesn't always mean good research. So what you have to actually do is in all your evaluations, you have to be able to evaluate the research itself. And I think I'm going to just go very quickly on this part. That, there's today, when you look at it, there's some critical tools now that are becoming very important. One is quantum mechanics. That can we do quantum computations? This is becoming very important, but I feel not enough people know this. I feel now engineers also should know quantum mechanics, because there are so many applications in optics, in computing. So optics means communication, computing. So many materials design, all this, you need to know quantum mechanics, and they're all using it. But I think this is something that we should focus on. That can we develop strong expertise? Because if you want to go to the next level, this thing is very important. The second thing is bioengineering. Now people are doing hacking of organisms, and you can do it in their garage, because it's become, synthetic biology has become so easy to do. And a lot more effort we should put into synthetic biology and bioengineering because of its impact in all these areas. And then communication. engineering. I mean, the internet has now connected billions of people. So how can we leverage that, and uh, in terms of social networks, IoT, banking, finance, and so forth. And then, of course, computing, high performance computing. I think CSIR must have huge resources for that. We must figure out these things. I mean, I just went to Chat GPT and said, okay, I have to give this lecture, AMRIT lecture. So I said, how can CSIR? I got a beautiful presentation, not this one, but I got one. So this is, I mean, it is just incredible. You cannot believe it. I just said, give me a C code for uh, calculating the determinant of a matrix. That's a simple thing because it just like, I ran the code, it gave the nothing, so it's just so powerful, and this computing will have applications in huge number of areas. And I feel, the kind of expertise we already have in IT, I feel this is one area where we can put in a lot of effort. And so let me say a couple of words that there's tremendous opportunities today if we invest in computing, because very powerful computers are available at low cost. And you can also use, of course, cloud time. And more importantly, powerful free open source software is available. So you can solve significant problems which were not feasible in the past. I mean, in the past, one small problem, you had to do a PhD thesis to solve it. Today, in 5 minutes, you can solve it because the software is for free. Computers are so powerful. And, I use a lot of this thing which is used for molecular dynamics called LAMPS. Now, this is done by this whole software is actually written by some researchers in a national lab, Sandia National Lab in US. And it's available for free. It's beautifully documented and, very widely used. And, I use it for many things like I'm doing granular material flow, looking at molecular simulation of polymers and so forth. So here, with computing, you can do very detailed analysis. So, it's great for science, great for design. And you can just vary any parameter to whatever you want. You can make a density of anything. You can make, and this gives new insights and possibility of innovations. And I really feel that some CSIR labs should take up this, just like how Sandia National Lab is developing this. We can also start contributing to some of these big software because, once we get familiar with it, let's say, for example, if you want to do CFD, each time, each license will cost you 10 lakhs or something like this. Whereas this is free. So if this is widely available and it can be, used in all the labs, it can have a great benefit. And of course, there's huge business opportunity in this also. So there are many startups which have used software as their basis. Actually, all of these are all for computational fluid dynamics. From IIT Bombay, there was one Zeus Numerics, which is doing quite well. So that professor his research area was computational fluid dynamics from aerospace. Then Tridiagonal has come out of NCL, process simulations and all this, very successful. And a new company called Sutra Sankhya has come from JNC, again, a different type of CFD. So this is also a great opportunity, and I think given that we are so strong in IT, I think this is something we can. So to finally conclude, so I just tried to say a few things. One is that modern products are a combination of these things. Science is at the core of technology, but the connection is not direct. And continuous advancements make the technology more affordable and competitive. So I tried to show some examples of this. CSIR has made invaluable contributions to the technology landscape, and I think people should acknowledge it. And they have provided a foundation for industrial growth in many sectors. Going forward, research excellence must be the real mantra. Because if you want to compete at the international level, this is the only way. And we have to fine tune systems to enable the recruitment of the best scientists. These two things are very closely connected. And these scientists should be given cutting edge facilities. And of course, they must be given support systems for translation. And CSIR should build strength in emerging areas, including computing, and consider, have some teams which will look at how they can contribute to open source software. And of course, the current status of CSIR is great. And I'm sure all the work that you're doing today will serve as future examples of AMRIT in time to come. So thank you very much. And I hope it was not too long.